On today's episode of the Locked On Texans Podcast, wake up, Nick! The top two receivers are off the market. So what's next for the Houston Texans at that receiver position?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation. It's time to go to war this week, and we kick off this week of today's Locked On episode with John Hickman, Brian Big Sarge, Badfield, your Texans insiders, and credential media members. We will be diving into the Texans Mount Rushmore. Who's the top four guys that should be representing the Houston Texans on there? Texans Release Shaq Mason. We'll dive into that. And Nick Caserio, are you seeing this? The top receivers have found a new home, the top receivers for this free agent class, or guys that were going to become available. Excuse me. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets winning your first $5 bet. Win over the weekend, Devante Adams signed a 2-year deal worth $46 million, $26 million guaranteed. DK Metcalf traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 2025 second-round pick. And Metcalf and the Steelers agreed to a 5-year deal extension worth $150 million. The top two guys have found a new home, Sarge. Do we have a problem with Houston not bringing in either of these guys, not trading for DK, not signing Davante Adams, or are we feeling like we need to trust the process and let Nick Caserio get things handled?
First of all, greetings and salutations, Mr. Hickman. I think that Nick Caserio did the right thing by not exploring either one, because you look at a wide receiver like Devante Adams, he's 31 years old, man. He'll be 32 years old next year. He got a lot of football on his body. There isn't, Father Time is the one person that has never been defeated. So with the amount of football that he's played at a high level at that, I mean, we're not talking about just some guy who's just been, dilly-dallying in the league and just dragging his feet in the league. This is a guy who has played, has been one of the top wide receivers, for a very long time in the NFL. And so he isn't one of those guys that just, mails it in all the time. He's one of those guys who has, been to the proverbial wide receiver mountaintop. And so that catches up with you. We watched it. When it came to, if we're looking at another sport, we're seeing, what Father Time is starting to catch up with a LeBron James, who just suffered an injury. He's going to be out for a while. We watched Kobe Bryant suffer an injury. We watched, we've watched, some of these guys. We even watched some of the best, watch their careers decline. I mean, you think about a Peyton Manning when he got to the point where he could barely throw the ball down the field. And so, it's getting to that point where it's going to be with Devante Adams, and maybe going to the Los Angeles Rams and playing under, Sean McVay and playing with a Matthew Stafford will, revitalize his career and keep it going for the next 2 seasons. But if I'm Nick Caserio, I'm not giving him that money. I'm not giving him $26 million guaranteed. And that's the one thing that you and I talked about a lot last week. A lot. I kept asking you, okay, if you're gonna bring him in, at what cost? How much? That was my whole thing. You can bring him in, but how much is he going to cost? And I think that price tag that he has is entirely too much. Now,
$26 million guaranteed, 46 over 2 years. That is a lot.
And the one thing that you cannot do, John, the one thing you cannot do is you cannot disrespect Nico Collins like that. Of course, Devante Adams has put in way more work in this NFL, in the NFL than Nico Collins has. But Nico Collins is your future. Nico Collins is your number one. You're not, and especially if he's going to go in and restructure his deal so you can go out and get somebody, but now you're going to bring somebody in and pay him more money than me. No, I think that Nico is on that trajectory to get the amount of money that he's going to get. And so, John, I'm going to stop right there at Devante Adams, and then I'll jump into DK Metcalf real quickly. But what was your thoughts on Devante Adams going to the Rams?
Yeah, I kind of mirror everything you say. You just said I really wanted Devante here. I think Devante would have given Houston a lot of flexibility in terms of how they look at the draft, how they go about the draft, how they go about building the rest of their roster. Also considering that they just brought over and traded for Christian Kirk. So you look at those two, potentially those two guys in that room with a Nico Collins and still adding through the draft, but maybe that allows you for, excuse me, allows for the Houston Texans to maybe address other needs early in the draft and not put so much of an emphasis on wide receiver. But I think the justification of 46 over 2 years, 26 guaranteed, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And maybe Houston just looked at that and said, well, we could, with Nick Caley, with the quarterback we believe we have, still with Nico Collins, and how they view players in the draft. We've been told that they really like Matthew Golden, and I'm starting to think he's the guy they have to trade up for. But we would be able to take that money and really kind of fill some other cracks and holes on our team.
Yeah.
Jeopardizing our franchise financially, but without kind of going into another season strapped in cash a little bit, so to speak. So I 100% agree to the DK Metcalf thing. I think we're probably going to say the same thing. You know, you trade the second round pick. That's not so much the problem. The problem is a 5-year extension, $30 million a year.
Yeah.
That is a lot for DK Metcalf. No way am I hating on him. Congratulations. He deserves it. But I don't know if that makes sense for the Houston Texans, considering within that 5-year span, hell, within the next 2 years, he'll finish out his last year of this contract. But then next year, that first $30 million kicks in. But then also, hey man, you got Derek Stingley that needs to be taken care of. You got some players that need to be taken care of. And then you also have to consider down the line, and Myles Garrett just changed the game. You got to pay, you're going to have to pay Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. So long term, that really jeopardizes the Houston Texans' future.
And John, I look at it like this. Don't get me wrong. I like DK Metcalf. I think that he would have been a great addition on the opposite side of Nico Collins if they would have been able to make it work. But I'm not paying him $30 million a year. He hasn't done $30 million a year worth of work. I don't think I've ever seen him really do that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from his physicality, how big he is. I know he can run. That's it. I know he can run. I know, like, if they're gonna run the go route every time with him, then cool. If you got to run other routes, DK Metcalf may not be your guy. But I'm not going to be a hypocrite, because I did say that I would want to see him on the opposite side. I'm not paying a guy who probably still developing $30 million a year. So what Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans avoided, and I'm pretty sure Nick kept saying, if the price comes down, then maybe, we'll give up a second round pick for a guy with his.
I don't think the second round pick is the problem.
It's not. It's the $30 million a year. And so, and you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be petty here just a little bit, John. I like what Seattle did. I want to go to a warm weather climate where a team is going to win. They sent him back to another cold weather team for a team that ain't even got a quarterback. He in the same position. By being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, he is in the same position right now that he was in 2 days ago by not having a quarterback on the Seattle Seahawks. The Pittsburgh Steelers don't have a quarterback either. And not only that, John, I see him going right. Side note, I don't know what it is about these Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers, Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, George Pickens. DK Metcalf is going to fall right into that. And the reason why I said that is because you would think that it would be out of the ordinary to be like, oh man, here comes another Pittsburgh wide receiver. He's not probably going to have those type of issues. And now you're saying, well, maybe so, because he had all these demands. And so I preface that to say that I don't know if the demands that he has, or the mindset that he has, that he is a premier top wide receiver in the NFL, would have resonated in that Houston Texans locker room. So I would have loved to see the potential I would love to have seen the potential, John. I just don't believe in the price tag.
I want to transition a little bit. We could pick it up in the second half of the show before we talk about Shaq Mason. Excuse me. Where do the Houston Texans go now? Because, I mean, re-signing Christian Kirk, we X out Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
Devante is in LA. DK is in Pittsburgh. This isn't This isn't like a shiny wide receiver free agent class. They got some guys that can play. Chris Godwin, we don't know if he's going to go back to Tampa or if somebody's going to overpay for him. He's a name that a lot of people like. For Houston, does it make more sense to say, well, we added a vet, we have Nico, let's just put our eggs in one basket for the draft, or should they bring in another vet? So can we talk about that when we come back before we dive into the Shaq Mason conversation?
For sure.
We got more Locked On Texans. This is a message from our sponsor, TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were ever going to get any money back. And then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with TurboTax experts who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention so they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All you need to do is sit back and relax, and you'll get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. This is Taxes. Get an expert on TurboTax right now. Visit TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only available in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Welcome back to the Locked On Texans podcast. John, before we went to the break, you and I were talking about the recent transactions that happened with Devante Adams, former New York Jets wide receiver, heading to the Los Angeles Rams on a 2-year deal, and DK Metcalf being traded from the Seattle Seahawks to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's set to sign. It's been reported he's set to sign a 5-year, $150 million deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you and I agree that that's entirely too. But for both of those wide receivers, that was entirely too much for the Houston Texans to give up, especially knowing that they have a lot of contracts and a lot of holes that they still need to fill. They could use some of that money. But John, you also were alluded to, what do the Texans do next? So I want to pick your brain real quickly and ask you, what do the Texans do next as far as getting a wide receiver?
Sarge, I really believe, yes or no question, how this roster, how the wide receiver room is currently put together, is it enough?
No.
Okay. I wholeheartedly think that there is at least one more vet out there the Houston Texans can bring in. Who is that vet? I'm not sure. I mean, I like Tutu Atwell. He's going back to LA, so he'll be playing with Devante. Chris Godwin is a name out there, but I also look at Chris Godwin, who's coming off an ACL injury. I'm not sure his asking price would make sense for Houston. So we'll have the same conversation again. Like, is it enough? Does it make sense for Houston to sign a player, good player, to that contract when he's coming off a major injury? This unit isn't the wide receiver free agency class isn't great, but there's a guy in that class that would be able to come in and make sense for Houston as a vet. But I really think the next best thing is to say, listen, we like guys in this draft. We've talked to guys during the combine, NFL combine. We've been able to kind of get a read on some of these guys. We've been able to kind of get a feel on some of these guys to figure out how they can be utilized in this offense, how the CJ, look at them and whether or not it'll make sense schematically. I think the draft is probably the next best thing for Houston. Like right now, currently, you'll get a vet. Yeah, you'll get a vet. They'll do that. But for the receiver that we believe can help put this unit over the top, I think it's going to come from the draft.
Yeah. And John, you and I, we discussed this on the episode on the show last week. I told you, looking at the wide receiver free agent market, it was half ripe, half rotten. And the right parts, two of the right pieces of fruit are going to another team, and about one of the only other ripe fruit. Now, I don't want to call these other wide receivers rotten. I'm just using that as an analogy, but they're not as good, and they're not worth what some of them are going to want in the free agent market. They're not worth long-term deals to play opposite of Nico Collins. And so, the only other person that would be left out there, and you can play Stephon Diggs on the outside some. He can play the inside and the outside, but he's watching what Devante Adams got and watching what DK Metcalf is about to get. He's going to require his asking price is going to be around that. And if I'm the Houston Texans, I'm saying no, I'm not giving you that because you are an older wide receiver coming off of an injury, and so I'm not doing that. And hell, I don't even know if they can even get in contact with Stephon Diggs right now. You see, he deactivated his X account, right?
I didn't see that.
He deactivated his X account, so maybe he's locked in, knowing that legal tampering starts Monday and free agent signings actually start on Wednesday. But after that, you're going to have to go into the draft and try to get some wide receivers because there's really nobody else that's left. It's only last week we did, John. You and I previously talked about DIY, do it yourself. We were talking about Nick Caserio with the do it yourself project with the offensive line. It looks like that's what he's going to have to do with this wide receiver unit for this year as well. Because if you go on a draft and you get you a wide receiver, cool. You got a rookie on a rookie deal. But John, there's some wide receivers that are coming out that's going to be unrestricted free agents in 2026. That the Houston Texans could look at. We've talked at ad nauseum about T. Higgins, but they also have like Cortland Sutton is going to be an unrestricted free agent if he doesn't sign an extension throughout the year with Denver. I would like to see. I could see Cortland Sutton on the opposite side of Nico Collins. You also got a guy that I think that you spoke highly of before on this show in Terry McLaurin in Washington.
Yeah, I love Scary.
Yeah, and so if they don't throw him a bag, he could be available. So this may be a draft where, this would be a year where they have to go out and do it, try to patchwork it and do it themselves one more time, and they may have to do that through the draft. Now, here's the question I have for you, though, John. Matthew Golden is not going to be available at 25.
They're going to have to trade up and go get him.
And I'm going to tell you right now, there's a team that's drafted at number 12 that needs a wide receiver and could use a Matthew Golden. And that's the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys with a new coach, a new offensive scheme. They're in a prime position to take a wide receiver like a Matthew Golden. You look at a team like the Seattle Seahawks, who drafts at 18. They no longer have Tyler Lockett. They no longer have DK Metcalf. They're in the wide receiver market now. And if they can get a wide receiver like Golden to go with whatever quarterback they're going to bring in or whatever they're trying to do at the quarterback position, like he should be available around that time. But if he's not, this is a side note, but Tyler Booker is still going to be there, and they need an offensive lineman too. So this point, what happened and what transpired with Devante Adams and DK Metcalf kind of pushed.
Yeah, it impacts a lot of things. Yeah, it really impacts some things. And I also would say that maybe Houston, that vet could be a Darius Slayton, who's still fairly young, 28 years old, has played some good football in the NFL to bring him in. But also, again, hey, scouts, front office guys who were spending countless hours watching film and diving into some of these players' background, they're just going to have to hit on the guy.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, I have more faith right now in Houston drafting a successful receiver, than I do Houston drafting an offensive lineman. So I feel like whoever they bring in could, work.
Real quickly before we move on to Shaq Mason, what do you have more confidence in? Do you have more confidence in them drafting a good wide receiver or signing one in free agency this year?
Drafting.
Yeah, me too.
Drafting. And I'll say this. We won a DK, 4.3 speed, big receiver, the whole nine. I wouldn't mind Houston going after Jaden Higgins, man, out of Iowa State. I really wouldn't. He does a lot of good things on the football field.
My guy is Jalen Royals out of Utah State.
You like Royals, and a lot of people have been starting to come along the Royals. So there's some guys out here. And again, with a quarterback that Houston has, the presumed scheme that we think we'll see from Nick Caley and Nick Popovich, Cole Popovich, excuse me, getting the best.
They all the same. They all running that whole Patriots.
They cousins, man. They one big family. But him revising that offensive line, we'll see the offense move smoother and somebody can be able to just step in and just dink and dunk and be successful with the quarterback. Now the Texans have released Shaq Mason. He'll be released before the 2025 season. The team is designating the veteran wide receiver as a post June 1st cut, which means they'll save that money June 2nd, but they'll save $9.4 million in cap space. Sarge, I'm going to give it to you. We've been talking about the wide receiver unit, so I ain't going to say too much about it, but this does feel like that they're giving themselves some wiggle room to address certain needs after the draft, depending on how things work out. But this was a move that absolutely needed to be made. And this also tells me Houston is going to upgrade in the areas that was clearly deemed just bad overall play last year. And Shaq Mason, who's been a very good vet in this league for a very long time, he was a problem. He's now not going to be on his roster. Now they look towards fixing that problem.
And John, it's funny because we're talking about Shaq Mason right now, and the Houston Texans, making him a post June 1 cut. And the whole show, only thing we've been talking about is wide receivers. So it's funny because those may go hand in hand, John, and especially with some more restructuring of contracts that's coming up. I wouldn't be surprised if the Houston Texans tried to, free up as much money as they can to go at a big name wide receiver on another team. I wouldn't be surprised if they
to trade for one,
trade for one. Yes, I wouldn't
because
be surprised.
Does it feel like the race to fix one of those positions first, and maybe whatever you get to first, the other one may not. The other one may suffer a little bit. Like they'll fix both, of course, but it may not be with the top player available.
Yeah, because John, you look at it like this too. Like, we talked how bad this wide receiver market is. The interior offensive line market is terrible right now too. Like the guard, there's no good guards out there. If I'm the Houston Texans, that I just feel like I gotta have right now, and I don't. And John, how many interior offensive linemen can you name coming out of the draft that's a day one starter? I mean, that's going to be available
right now, I only think that Tyler Booker is a guard that's labeled a guard. Sarge, right now, the talk is about a lot of tackles moving in to play guard.
Yeah. And so
that speaks to the class itself.
So that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, you're looking at the draft class as far as guards are concerned. You're looking at the free agent market as far as guards are concerned. And so, yes, Shaq Mason had to go. And like I said, it may be, with cutting him, restructuring some of these other deals. A couple of these other players are going to get restructured. A couple of these other players are going to get extended. You may be looking and saying, okay, we've talked about it before. They need to fix that wide receiver room, and they need to fix it quickly. And I know CJ needs to be protected, but I do believe that you can, insert Juice Scruggs right there and just give him an opportunity, especially, to see what you're going to get. And maybe it's another thing that you have to wait a year for. But back to Shaq Mason, John, personally speaking, Shaq Mason was a guy that always had time for me. Shaq Mason was a guy that I could always talk to. And like I told you all before, it's funny that, the connection, it's 6 degrees of separation between him and Jelly Roll, the country music singer. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And so on a personal level, I love talking to Shaq Mason. Like I said, somebody who always had time to talk to me. On a professional level, it just, John, one of the things that makes an offensive lineman like real good, and you tell me if I'm wrong or not, is the ability to be able to kick step back, right? To be able to get that kick step back, to get that leverage, to get that body, to be able to do what you need to do, right?
Yes, sir.
Had you seen
Especially
Shaq Mason?
In pass blocking.
Shaq Mason had lost that.
Yeah, he lost it.
Shaq Mason had lost that. John, how many times did you see Shaq Mason become a pulling guard?
This year?
Yes.
Not sure.
His weight fluctuated entirely too much for some of the offensive coaches. His technique has started to get bad.
Suffered a lot.
Yeah, his techniques has started to get bad, and some people would say that maybe some of the things that he was doing off the field, as far as his lifestyle is concerned, had to do with him, the bad play that his play on the field. Excuse me. So you look at it, John, and I'm saying to myself, nah. And like I said, I like Shaq Mason personally, but it's time to move on, especially with the price tag that he had. And if you can save money, knowing that they need that cap flexibility, you got to go ahead and get rid of him and start over. And I hate that for Shaq Mason because, John, he, like you're looking at a guy whose career was really good with the New England Patriots and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Had a good first year.
Yeah. And so I'm just like, no, they needed to do that, though.
Yeah, it was time. Let's talk about the Mount Rushmore in this franchise history. We'll dive into that to close off today's show. Texan fans across the nation. Listen here, man. We got March Madness coming up. We have what else we got? We got the NBA playoffs coming up soon. March Madness is here. FanDuel is hooking you up with a chance to get in on the action.
Baseball is about to start.
Baseball is about to kick it off. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets. Win your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. They make the app easy to use. The app is easy to navigate. Also, when you get paid, you get paid then and there. No waiting around, no waiting. Your money in your hand, so to speak, your digital hand within 15 minutes. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, visit FanDuel.com or download the app today. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. The Houston Texans have had a lot of great players come through their franchise, unlike the Cleveland Browns. I just wanted to throw that out there because the Cleveland Browns are one of the most poorly ran organizations in all of sports.
They've had some greats come through there, John. Let's not act like Jim Brown didn't play for them.
Were you alive when Jim Brown played?
Yeah.
I rest my case.
I think I was.
You were not alive
in the 70s. Jim Brown. I was born in 1972, John.
By the time the 70s rolled around, Jim Brown was in blaxploitation movies. So at least in the last 30 years, we know they ain't been a good. But given Myles Garrett, who by the way deserves it, that contract, the Houston Texans better pray every year that salary cap goes up, because if Will Anderson stays on the trajectory he's on right now, not only will he eventually be a Mount Rushmore for the Houston Texans, but he may be making quarterback money. I just want to say that they missed the market up. But Sarge, in your opinion, and I think limiting this to 4 is very difficult because JJ and Andre automatically take a spot.
It ain't difficult. I can even give you, because we're talking about the Mount Rushmore as of right now. We're not talking about when it's time to replace somebody and put CJ up there, or when it's time to replace somebody and put Will up there. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Mount Rushmore of right now.
So we know 2 spots are reserved. No way around it, unless you feel like being petty and buzzed. We know that JJ and Andre, those are reserved spots, and they're going to always stay reserved.
Okay, so I'm going to give you, look, you go first, you give me your third, and then I'm going to give you my third, and then I'm going to give you my fourth. I'm going to give you my fourth. Who's your third?
Unfortunately, I did a lot of thinking about this, and Eric Murray does not make the cut for this one. So,
God dang it, John.
For me, number 3. No, this is tough. But I feel like you may lean in the favor of the skill guy. I'm going to go Dwayne Brown.
And number 3?
At number 3. Well, I mean, as
your third,
as one of the 4.
The third head on the mountain, right?
I'm giving love to.
Okay, well, Dwayne Brown. Okay,
now you know
I can see that. I can see that, John, because Dwayne Brown was a really, really good. He was a really good offensive lineman for the Houston Texans,
drafted to this franchise. He was drafted to the Houston Texans as well.
So I can see that, John. If DeAndre Hopkins didn't exist, then I could say Dwayne Brown. But DeAndre Hopkins exists, John. He made multiple All-Pros. He went through an entire season and did not drop a pass. During his time here with the Houston Texans, he averaged less than 5 drops a year. And some people might be like, "Oh, okay, Sarge, that's impressive, but why would you put him on the Mount Rushmore?" Because he wasn't dropping he wasn't dropping passes, catching everything from quarterbacks he didn't even have continuity with. Yeah. How many quarterbacks did DeAndre Hopkins?
1 year, I think D-Hop had like 4 or 5 quarterbacks throw him the ball, man.
You see what I'm saying? And he still performed and produced on the field without a natural number 2 wide receiver. Now, people are going to say Will Fuller, but Will Fuller, remember, the knock on him coming out of Notre Dame was he couldn't catch. And when he first got into the NFL, he could run, he could DK Metcalf, but he couldn't catch. He could not catch. And so D-Hop had to make up for that. So number 3 for me, I got D-Hop. Now, hold on. Let me do number 4 real quick. And then
you got it. I mean, y'all go ahead. Let me mute my mic.
Yeah, because Dwayne Brown, I don't know how you could put him over DeAndre Hopkins. But, John, at number 4, I have number 4. I know the name that shall not be mentioned in Houston. I get it, right? I understand it. I understand that Deshaun Watson is not a name that people want to say here in the city of Houston. I get it. I got it. I understand it, right? I understand there's a lot there's some musical artists whose names can't be mentioned, but people still listen to the music. And so when you look at Deshaun Watson,
you better catch in the name of love.
When you look at Deshaun Watson, John, he played in 4 seasons, right? 4 seasons, 14,539 yards passing, 104 touchdowns, 36 interceptions. His last year of starting, 4,823 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And I know that didn't translate into a lot of wins because they only won 4 games in that final season, but he wasn't working with a whole lot either. And so if you're going to look at this Mount Rushmore, not you per se, but some of the fans out there, some of the people who put these lists together, if you're going to look at the Mount Rushmore and say Deshaun Watson doesn't belong up there, if we're going to we're strictly talking about his play on the field, not his play off the field, not the play that he loved to do off the field, allegedly. John, you cannot, there's not another player you can think of throughout this Houston Texans organization that you could put before Deshaun Watson. And some people are going to say Arian Foster. Deshaun did more with less time.
Arian Foster, man. I'm honestly, and this is where 3 got very difficult for me because Arian Foster deserves so much love.
He does.
So much love, so much credit to the success of this franchise when they first got it going. But the next guy for me would be D-Hop, honestly. And let me be real with you. I only said Dwayne Brown because Dwayne Brown is a guy that people forget about, but was one of the better tackles in the NFL when he was with the Houston Texans and really meant to lie. You talk about having to catch from multiple receivers. Dwayne Brown was blocking for a lot. I mean, from multiple quarterbacks. Dwayne Brown was blocking for a lot of quarterbacks. And man, I really do like Dwayne Brown in this game, but for me, it would be D-Hop, next guy, and really D-Hop could be third at this point. But D-Hop was a bad boy, man. Honestly,
yes, John, I'm telling you, man.
D-Hop, Dwayne Brown is all biasness for me. I'm gonna be real. I'm very biased because I can make a case for Devante Leach as well. But D-Hop was a bad boy.
Devante Leach.
Devante just he meant so much. Like we got to do a Mount Rushmore of players that don't get the credit they deserve. I think that'll be more interesting.
Yeah, wasn't D-Hop like he was 99 on the game for a long time, wasn't
he? D-Hop was crazy. The one thing before we close out, the one thing I always hated, the NFL, them referees took away the behind the legs catch.
Yeah,
it didn't count. We all saw it with our eyes. And I felt like that was a moment that you just can't rob a player from. Between the legs, that was insane. But it would be D-Hop. The case for Deshaun, I mean, say all things aside.
Yes. All alleged things aside.
you can make a case for Deshaun. And I think what hurts the most when you look at the player is, man, we just saw Josh Allen get another crazy contract.
Yeah.
Those two, I feel like, were on the same trajectory. He's not in Houston no more. He's in Cleveland. And again, Cleveland is the worst ran organization in pro sports.
Well, I mean, John, none of the people that we named finished their career in Houston. JJ didn't, Andre didn't, DeAndre didn't, and
didn't Andre sign a 1-year contract, a 1-day contract?
Man, DeAndre had. Hold on, you say Andre?
Didn't Andre sign a 1-day contract?
Don't Andre got a Indianapolis Colts jersey?
Thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans Podcast. I can't argue against that. But thank y'all for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast.
Make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with the Z at the end. And if you don't like my Mount Rushmore,
I'm on your bumper. Until next time, ladies and gents, and Battle Red Nation across the world, peace.